what you're gonna do.
You can't fight the future.
Wrestling God.
ProWrestlingRadio.com presents.
Are you talking to me?
Pro Wrestling Radio live online.
You think The Rock actually cares?
What is he doing here?
Oh, it's true.
I'm bringing everybody with me.
That's hard time.
To be the man.
Call in with a question or comment.
6, 1. Can you feel it?
I hate your ever. Hold the damn phone.
Toll free at 1-877-800-8834.
That's how I roll.
You sick son of a bitch. Come get some.
Because I've done all of that.
And now your host of the show,
The king is back on his throne.
Eric
Excuse me.
Gargiulo.
And that's the bottom line because Stone Cold said so.
Momentarily, we will bring up our first guest, former World Tag Team Champion, the Freebird, gorgeous Jimmy Garvin, and one of my all-time favorites. And coming up in the second hour of the show, we're going to take a break at 1 o'clock for the news, and at 1:05 we will return with the living legend, Bruno Sammartino, who will be taking your calls at approximately 1:30. I also want to make a mention here that we have been provided with tickets to tonight's WWE Raw Live event. Now, at about 12:30 or so, we will open up the box office here at WBCB, and you can just call in and grab them. We have 2 pair here of the tickets. You can talk to our intern, Brock, who will be handling the phones. Let them know who you are. Come and pick up the tickets, and they're yours. It's that simple and that easy. Get your tape recorders ready because this is going to be one for the archives. Let's bring up my first guest. He is a former AWA and World Championship Wrestling World Tag Team Champion. And again, one of my all-time favorite wrestlers, gorgeous Jimmy Garvin. Jimmy, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you very much, Eric. It's nice to talk to you today.
It's an honor to have you. And Jim, when I grew up watching wrestling, I always loved the promos. And, you know, in my opinion, you were one of the greatest of all time. And I don't want to jump too far ahead here in your career, but let me just ask you, how did you come up and develop your style of promos?
As I think back on it, I mean, when I first started, which was November 1st, 1969, I wasn't too good.
Okay.
Like anything else, you know, when you start, you know, you just have to work on it. I remember Bobby Shane was a big influence on me back in the days when I was traveling with him down in the Gulf Coast area. And just, you know, just watching and paying attention to the different guys' style, and then with just practicing on-the-job type training. You know, I mean, at first, like I said, they were pretty crappy, but then as I got more comfortable and got more relaxed, then I could get more creative, and then I found that as all that kind of the steps went forward, that I kind of had a knack for it, I discovered.
Gotcha. Now, is there any kind of an interesting anecdote behind "It's Not My Fault"?
You know what? Somebody asked me that the other night on the show, and to tell you the truth, I think it just kind of came out one day because most of my interviews, in fact, 99% of them, were off the cuff. I mean, they were just, I never really thought much about anything as far as the content went. No further than the fact of who I was wrestling and when it was going to be and where it was going to be, and then everything else kind of flowed. So somewhere in that process, the "It's Not My Fault" phrase came out.
Gotcha. And again, we're talking to gorgeous Jimmy Garvin. His website is live. It's a tremendous website, jimmygarvin.com. And Jimmy, you have a DVD for sale on your website taking a behind-the-scenes look at the Great American Bash. Maybe you could tell the listeners about it.
Well, it's a fantastic DVD. You know, I held on to it for years and years. It was when Jim Crockett Promotions did pretty much the last Great American Bash tour around the country, and I just brought my camera with me, my video camera, and just happened to think, well, you know what, I want to tape the guys behind the scenes, you know, before the matches started or what they were doing during the matches, and because it was a lot of funny stuff went on, as I explained on the website. You know, we traveled so much, and night after night, that we had to do something to relieve the tension or something to entertain ourselves, and we found that as sitting around there for hours and hours, night after night, that we did some pretty funny stuff to keep the mood going and to keep everybody's frame of mind where it should be. So I just took it with me around the country and got some really great stuff and some very funny moments. You know, people like, God bless him, but Hawk, you know, who was a good friend of mine, and his partner, Animal, and Sting, and Lex Luger. The list goes on and on. Jimmy Cornette has a little piece in there. Dr. Death, Steve Williams, all the guys that was on the tour at that time with Jim Crockett Promotions. And mostly, what comes to my mind, it was the last of an era, you know. I mean, it was the last of the, you know, the old days, so to speak, you know, where we just traveled our butt off and did what we had to do. We wrestled hard, we played hard, and, of course, some of that shows in there. But it's just a really, really good DVD, and it's the first of a few to come. The next one is Behind the Scenes Africa. That'll be coming out around November, and that's a 21-day tour I took over in Africa with Chris Adams. Again, we lost him, but he was a real good friend of mine. We had great matches in Texas and Kansas City and St. Louis, and Kevin Von Erichs on that one, Jimmy Snuka, the Iron Sheik. The list goes on. And again, it was just kind of what we did to keep ourselves in the right frame of mind to do that kind of traveling under those kind of circumstances. But the behind-the-scenes bash is a really, really unique piece that's, you know, never been seen anywhere in the world. And I invite everybody to check out JimmyGarvin.com, and they won't be disappointed if they get it, because it's just really, really good.
And that's tremendous. And on JimmyGarvin.com, what I think is very cool, and one of my favorite questions that I ask my guests, which we'll get to later on in the interview, is the road stories. And you just started telling some road stories on there, and the one about the bear is tremendous.
Yeah, the bear was a really funny one. You know, I mean, I was just a kid. You know, I was like 18 or 19 years old wrestling for Nick Goulas, and it was in Bowling Green, and I invite the people to go on the website and check it out, because it was something. I'll tell you that. I really had to pay my dues in that department. Of course, I don't wrestle bears anymore, and never did after that. And then the one after that with Michael and I in Tigerland. Have you seen that one yet?
Yes, absolutely. Him on the bar.
Yeah. I got to tell you, man, you almost had to be there to see that, but that was hilarious. And I try to update it about once a month. I try to send a story out for the fans and give them kind of an idea of what we went through, and, you know, how we entertained ourselves.
That's tremendous. Have you heard the story, and if so, and even if not, what do you think of it? Have you heard the story about Michael getting the microphone at the Stephanie McMahon and Triple H wedding and singing and just going a little crazy there?
No, but that sounds about right, Joe. Anytime Michael was around a microphone, it didn't matter. You know, he just kind of went into the other character.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, you know, after Behind the Scenes Africa, I'm going to have Behind the Scenes with the Fabulous Freebirds and the Bad Street Band, which takes a look at what we did when we traveled around. And you know, we had the Bad Street Band, and Michael and I hit the stages at the Atlanta Omni. We did a show there. We did one at Center Stage in Atlanta. And that's going to be kind of interesting, too.
Wow, that's tremendous. Yeah, as the story goes, you know, the McMahons were having a fairly elegant wedding, and then all of a sudden Michael grabbed the microphone and started singing, and, you know, some of the crowd that they were running with at the time, you know, weren't too happy with him.
Well, I can imagine, because, you know, Michael never could sing worth a darn anyway, you know. But he was a hell of an entertainer, though, I'll tell you that.
Oh, man. You know, I mean, when you talk about all-time greats when it comes to just watching in the ring and promos, and you think of guys like yourself and absolutely Michael Hayes.
Yeah, we played well off of each other. We worked well together. Everything just kind of flowed, because we were you know, we were living the gimmick, you know.
Right.
I mean, we weren't pulling no punches. We kind of said what was on our mind, you know.
Right. How now I know that the history with you and with yourself and Michael goes way back prior to your run as the Freebirds World Tag Team Champions in WCW.
Right.
How did you guys first wind up together as partners? Was it in Texas?
No, actually, as partners, you know, I after I forgot what year it was, maybe 89.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think, you know, more or less when I think about it, it's when Turner bought out Jimmy Crockett around that time. I took a year off.
Okay.
And then Michael called me up one day. He says, what do you think about teaming up? You know, we'll, you know, be the Fabulous Freebirds. You'll be a member. And I said, well, hell yeah, you know, that's fine. You know, I'll do that, because I was always the unofficial bird anyway back in Texas.
Sure.
Because Texas, the three birds were together, and then it was always me and Precious, and usually Sunshine and Chris doing battle. So but we always run together, so we were always kind of in each other's back pockets, so to speak. So Michael asked me, and I says, yeah, that'd be fine.
Right. Now, didn't you guys team up together at the Wrestle Rock show as well?
Yeah, we did do that. It was just kind of a temporary thing, but yeah, that was just that one time,
Gotcha. And again, we're talking to gorgeous Jimmy Garvin, and Jimmy, you've talked about in other interviews and in your bio the short time that you have spent with Eddie Graham as a youngster in the business. Anyway, what are your memories of Eddie Graham?
Well, that goes way, way back. I mean, I started when I was 9 years old.
Wow.
In Tampa. My family had a little small apartment complex, and Joe Scarpa and the great Malenko lived there. And to make a long story short, Joe Scarpa seen me one day and said, "Hey, why don't you come down to the 106 North Albany, the Sportatorium, and try out, because Eddie Graham has an amateur club, So I said, sure. So I went down there and fell in love with it, and then started my amateur wrestling career down there at the Sportatorium, 106 North Albany. In fact, Gordon Solie did an interview with me when I was 9 years old. So
wow.
The first time Gordon Solie interviewed me, I was just a 9-year-old kid. So, Eddie Graham used to take me to the tournaments along with Mike, who were both about the same age, and I had a real good relationship with Eddie Graham. He was a great person and great for wrestling.
Tremendous. Now, now all you can do is read about the legend of Danny Hodge, but you actually had the opportunity to work with him for a brief time. What was that like?
Well, that was always pretty interesting with Danny, because he was such an intense individual to start with. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, he's the only one that was on the cover of Time magazine as a Golden Glove boxer and a championship amateur wrestler at the same time.
Correct.
Holding both titles. And, he had that double tendons in his hands, born that way, so his strength was enormous if he ever got a hold of you. And he was a very aggressive wrestler anyway, and I was just a kid when I was, working in the ring with him. So, I was just hopefully, hoping that he was in a pretty good mood, and not hurt me too bad. Speaking about wrestling Danny Hodge, I was talking to somebody the other night, and, I wrestled Buddy Rogers.
Wow.
As well. I wrestled Lou Thez as well. And I'm trying to think, and I would always ask the guys, I says, if you ever find out who's out there today that's wrestled those three guys, that's not 100 years old, let me know, because, I'm 51 now.
Right.
And and before I was, I guess before I was 30, I had wrestled Hodge and Buddy Rogers. Buddy Rogers, I remember, in West Palm Beach. Mm-hmm. In fact, Buddy Rogers managed me for a while.
Really?
Yeah, and then, Lou Thez as well. So, that was pretty interesting stuff. I mean, I'm real proud that I got a chance to get in the ring with guys like that, because they are my heroes.
Absolutely. And I think you actually have my next guest beat, because I have Bruno Sammartino coming up next, and I think he has only been in the ring with Thez and Buddy Rogers. I don't think he was ever in the ring with Danny Hodge.
You'll have to ask him that.
Absolutely.
Because, no doubt he's a living legend himself, and I got a lot of respect for him. And to be honest with you, I've never met him.
Wow.
After all the years that he's been in the business, and myself, but of course, I was always NWA and kind of in the South, and he was mostly, WWF up in the North, so our paths didn't get a chance to cross, but give him my regards.
Absolutely.
I respect him a lot.
Absolutely. When you first broke in, and even for maybe the first 5 or 6 years in the wrestling business and doing the territories, who that you can remember that you could point to took you under their wing? Any old schoolers or old timers that particularly did?
Well, Frankie Kane always took an interest in me, who later went on to wrestle as the Great Mephisto. But Frankie Kane has got so much history in professional wrestling from going way back. He always kind of took care of me. Terry Garvin also helped me out a lot. Pat Patterson helped me out a lot. There was those stick out in my mind. Jack Briscoe, as I was coming up, not so much when I was managing, but when I started wrestling, he helped me out a lot.
Oh, okay.
He's a really good friend, both Jack and Jerry of mine.
Oh, excellent. I see. And also I should point out that on the WrestlingClassics.com, they have a message board where both you and Jack converse with fans, and I think that's very cool.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed doing that. I just started doing that a couple of months ago, and I get some interesting questions, and it just amazes me how they remember so well. Sometimes they ask me questions, and to be honest with you, I just can't remember the facts, but they sure remember the facts, and it's always a pleasure talking to them,
Sure. Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, what was it like? I know you both wrestled with and against and also wrestled for Bill Watts. What was it like to work for Bill Watts? I've heard a mixed bag of reactions from different guys.
Well, let's start, when I first worked for Bill Watts was in 1971, and holy smokes, 71 and 72, and he worked us to death. I mean, we did an awful lot of traveling, and I mean like hard driving, from Oklahoma City to New Orleans, and early TVs, and then go on to another. It was just like drive. He didn't have a lot of patience. I always got along with him okay, and don't really have anything bad to say about him. I mean, I try not to say anything bad about anybody if I can help it,
Sure.
Unless I just, feel like saying it. And sometimes, that's why I was always kind of a rebel anyway, because I didn't always play by the rules they wanted me to play by. But, I mean, I just call a spade a spade. Bill Watts was okay. I mean, he was a hard-driving promoter, that worked his boys pretty darn hard,
Wow. And you were there. You were in WCW when he came back, right?
Yeah.
Wow. So what was that like? Because, Bill Watts, 1971, is a way different story than Bill Watts, running the business like it's 71 in 92.
Yeah, I think he was fighting, and this is just my opinion, but I think he's an old school type guy too. And then when he got in there with the likes of the Turner Group and the guys that were slithering around up in the upper offices there, I'm not sure he could play their game,
Yeah.
So he had a little bit of a hard time maybe. And again, I could be totally wrong, but I just know Bill's from the old school, and it's hard to teach an old dog new tricks, so to speak. But I mean, he tried, and I just don't think he was very happy there. And again, he was fighting a lot of inside stuff too.
Sure. And without naming names, tell me you didn't get a little bit of a chuckle on some of the guys when you heard Bill was coming, and you said to yourself, I can't wait till, if they think it's bad now, wait till they get a hold of Bill.
Well, I think a lot of guys learned that when he arrived. I can't think of any particular individual that learned it any worse than any of the other guys. It's just that I don't think they were used to the way he, commanded the ship, you know?
Yeah, and going from Jim Herd and Kip Fry to Bill Watts is quite a drastic comparison there.
Yeah, but at least, we at least Herd, he didn't know nothing.
Right.
So at least Bill kind of knew what was going on. Kip Fry was a good guy. I got along with him. He was like another guy that was just thrown in the middle of something that he really didn't have any idea. He tried, and he was a really good guy. Don't misunderstand me, but it'd be like, he just was out of his field.
Yeah, absolutely. When we come back from the break, I got to take a break. When we come back from the break, I've had the opportunity to talk to different guys over the years that I've been doing this that were there when Ric Flair had left with the WCW title. Were you there when Ric Flair left with the title?
I don't think I was. I think that was after. I quit in '92.
Okay, because he left like right at the end of '91.
He did. Well, see, you know what? I don't remember because I mentally left probably right shortly before that. Because I said when I was 26 that I was going to retire when I turned 40, and that's what I did. So I was pretty much done. So I don't have a lot of memory on, him leaving. But I'll give you whatever I can.
Yeah, absolutely, and I'll tell you, give you a little bit of what some of the other guys said, and maybe you could just throw in your comments on that.
Sure.
Excellent. Well, again, we are talking to gorgeous Jimmy Garvin. His website is jimmygarvin.com. He has a DVD for sale on the website that takes a behind-the-scenes look at the Great American Bash, the last touring Great American Bash, as well as future DVDs that will be available on the site, road stories. Check it out, jimmygarvin.com. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we will continue with the former WCW and AWA World Tag Team Champion, gorgeous Jimmy Garvin, and we just scraped the surface of Ric Flair. We'll talk a little bit about Ric Flair when we get back, as well as more on the career of Jimmy Garvin. And don't forget, we do have 2 pairs of tickets to give away to this tonight. It's tonight, right? Tonight's Monday Night Raw. It's Raw Live at the Sovereign Bank Arena in Trenton, New Jersey. It's been rescheduled so many times. I forgot it was even tonight. And you know what? You can call in now if you would like. That's 888-922-2149. That's 922-2149 or locally at 215-949-3232. Call in now, and we only have 2 pairs of tickets to give away, so call in quick and make sure you can pick them up today because the show is tonight. You're listening to the show in 2 places. One on the internet through my website, ProWrestlingRadio.com, WBCB1490.com, and on the air, WBCB 1490 AM.
Benny the Bum's Crab House and Bar is the place for the freshest crabs. Their seafood is flown in daily, from crabs to flounder and shrimp to lobster. You won't find it fresher or better than at Benny the Bum's. Also offering chicken, steak, sandwiches, and salads. Open daily, Monday through Friday from 11 a.m. and Saturday and Sunday from 4. Benny the Bum's has a happy hour every day from 4 to 6. Benny the Bum's Crab House and Bar, 9991 Bustleton Avenue in the Northeast, 215-673-3000.
I want you to give it to me.
Sheesh, baby, I'm on the air here. Listen up, Trenton.
Oh, here we go.
Get closer than you've ever been to the most exciting brand in sports entertainment. Tonight at 7:30, WWE is back live at Sovereign Bank Arena. With the superstars of Raw, you'll see Chris Benoit.
The world heavyweight champion.
Could his title reign possibly end right here in Trenton? Or will the efforts of Randy Orton to win the title fall short?
There's no stopping Evolution.
Will Raw's most beloved superstar Eugene finally meet his end at the hands of the Nature Boy, Ric Flair?
Hi, this is Eugene. Come see me play some cool games on Evolution's Ric Flair. Woo!
You'll also see Chris Jericho, Edge, Kane, Batista, and more. 3 titles are on the line in one night. Great seats available now at the box office and Ticketmaster. WWE presents Raw Live.
There's a new time, but the same high standards for 2-Year Health with Sherry Putnam. That's right, you can still get your weekly dose of 2-Year Health on Monday mornings. It's just an hour later. Still broadcasting live from the Health and Wellness Center by Doylestown Hospital every Monday at 10 a.m. Every week, experts in their fields take your calls and share timely healthcare tips. It's informative, it's fun, it's 2-Year Health with your host, Sherry Putnam, asking the healthcare questions you want answered. Every Monday at 10 a.m. here on 1490 WBCB.
All commentators heard on WBCB express their own views. Their opinions do not necessarily reflect the feelings of others on WBCB, including the staff and management.
And now, back to Pro Wrestling Radio with your host of the show, the voice of Combat Zone Wrestling, Eric Gargiulo.
Thank you very much. And don't forget, we are going until 2 o'clock today. We're going to take a quick break at 1 for the news, and we'll be back at 1:05 with Bruno Sammartino. But let's bring up our current guest, gorgeous Jimmy Garvin, his website, jimmygarvin.com. And, Jim, we started to talk a little bit about Ric Flair before we went into the break. A couple of the guys, and you know what? It never even dawned on me until I started bringing the guys from that era on the radio show here. A couple of the guys were still very bitter and very upset at Rick leaving with the title at the time and going over there, and they're saying, yeah, it's great that Rick's making a buck over there, but he's trying to put us out of business and hurt our families. What's your take on it?
Well, like I was talking to you, too, a little bit before the break, it's a little foggy as far as him. I do remember him going up to the WWF out of here, and to be honest with you, I was so mentally separated from the business at the time to a degree that I didn't care too much. I mean, I just could care less, so to speak. I don't know if that makes sense to you, but I just didn't. I didn't normally care what Flair did anyway.
Right. You have an interesting story that you've told on the Wrestling Classics message board about Ric Flair.
Yeah, when he tried to fire me 3 times.
Yeah, why don't you talk about that for a second?
It's just amazing. I mean, he was more or less the booker at the time. Mm-hmm. If not the booker, he was right up the booker's whatever. But
yeah.
Hurricane Hugo, when that came and it hit my house, it put a 90-foot oak tree through 2 stories of it, and it turned it. A microburst came out of it, turned it 20 degrees off its foundation. Thank goodness I was off at the time, and being so close and involved in aviation, watching just everything that was happening on the radar, kind of had an idea that along with everybody else that it was getting ready to get pretty bad. So I had put my family in the basement. Of course, it destroyed my house, and then I had like a day off or something. Then I was supposed to go back to work, but I couldn't make the shot. And I called him. I said, "Look, my house is gone. My stuff strolled all over everywhere. I got to get my family a place to stay, so I'm not going to be making a shot. So he sent word back through Michael saying that if I missed another shot, I was going to be fired.
Wow.
So I sent a message back to Michael and called and called the people I needed to call and said, look, man, I need to have a couple days to get my family secure. But in the meantime, he tried 2 more different times to send messages threatening to fire me if I didn't make the shot. So I never really thought much of that. You know, I just don't think that that was a real nice thing to do. You know, I think it would have been more in line to say, look, take care of your family and get back to us when you got them taken care of, you know.
Sure, absolutely, absolutely. What was, at least from your standpoint and from where you were as talent, what was, how did the political struggle between Dusty and Flair affect the boys?
Well, it was kind of like, to me, it was one of those things that whoever won out in the argument with Jimmy Crockett, you know, because both of them, in my opinion, were going in different directions, and neither one of them were like having dinner at each other's houses too often, if you know what I mean.
Sure.
So there was always the conflict. Well, Flair had his guys, and Dusty had his.
Yeah.
And it just kind of separated, to a degree, it separated the group. And then you had, you know, Flair would do his angles, and Dusty would do his, and it was just an unnecessary discomfort in the air, you know.
Sure, sure. What was it like when Crockett had purchased the UWF? What was that initial blending of the talent? I mean, for you, I'm sure, who had been around the business for a while, you probably knew about 90% of the locker room anyway. But just how did that whole dynamic work out?
You know, again, and I hate to say it, but, you know, I probably didn't care at the time.
Yeah.
So I didn't pay much attention because, honestly, you know, there was stuff that went on in the business that, you know, I could just care less.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I knew I had a job to do, and I knew what my job was, and I kind of knew where everybody was going, but I never really got into the personal, you know, I just never got involved in that way.
Sure, sure. One of my favorite promos from Gorgeous Jimmy Garvin was when you first came into the NWA Crockett territory at the time, and you came out with the want ads, and you were talking about Wahoo looking for a job. What are your memories of your feud with Wahoo?
Just great memories. Wahoo is a legend and always will be, and well respected throughout the industry, and will always be remembered as a strong individual, and he was just a great guy. You know, when I first came to Crockett in '77, really just kind of starting to learn how to, you know, apply what I've watched all those years as a manager in the ring. Wahoo helped me out a lot then. Of course, coming in and working the angle with him right off the bat in '86, it was great. He was just a great guy. He had a big heart. He was a tough individual. You knew you were in a match when you were in the ring with Wahoo. His stuff was solid. He had a good attitude too. You know, I mean, he did what he wanted to do, and he said what he wanted to say. He wasn't an office type guy.
Yeah.
You know? And the interviews was so easy to do with him. You know.
Sure.
And could have gone so much further, but you know, there were certain constraints put on. So.
Yeah, it seemed like the feud ended pretty abruptly.
Yeah, it was. I think it was getting over.
Yeah, like I said, as a kid, I mean, you know, out of everything I've seen in the wrestling business, you know, that's one of the things that sticks out of my mind that I remember I remember the interview clear as day with the newspaper, and just remember the feud. So I mean, that should tell you something right there.
Well, and then I did the one which, you know, with all the thousands and thousands of interviews that I've done, I, like yourself, remember the ones with Wahoo when I had the fund. What was it? The Chief Fund. I had the big jug of pickle jar to raise money for the Chief. And
yes.
I wanted to go up in the hills here outside of Charlotte, and I looked for his mama, you know.
Uh-huh.
And I wanted to do a little film clip, you know, about going up and finding his mama up there on the reservation, and you know, looking in her tent for Wahoo, but no, that never happened. Which it would have been totally hilarious, you know.
Absolutely, absolutely. You know, this radio show is based out of the Philadelphia market, and you know, Philadelphia, you know, I would think was a very good town to you. You know, I know most people remember, your match with the Dynamic Dudes. I even saw a couple interviews where they've asked you about it. But I don't think that a lot of people remember because it wasn't on pay-per-view and it was just a regular house show. I remember being at a house show where you had just turned babyface and you did the angle with the Midnight Express and everything, where you came out as a surprise mystery partner. And I just remember the Civic Center going absolutely bonkers.
Well, Philadelphia, I'm not kidding when I say this, was one, if not my favorite city to come to. I mean, when we went into Philadelphia had the same attitude as I had, and the same attitude as Michael had.
Yeah.
And that is, we didn't care. We did what we wanted to do and said what we wanted to say, and we were going to act the way we wanted to, when we wanted to, and nobody was going to tell us different. And if they tried to tell us different and we didn't want to do it, we wouldn't go for it. And that was a good example with the fans. I mean, the promotion tried to, do a babyface thing out of the dudes, and the Philadelphia people told them to, that's not what we're going to do.
Yeah.
It was, Philadelphia was awfully, that auditorium there was electrifying.
Absolutely.
The fans were the greatest. I mean, they absolutely let you know what was on their mind. I mean, I know a couple of shows I was there, I wasn't feeling that good, and I mean, I was just run down, and I just wasn't at my 100%. Man, they used to let me know, that, I wasn't doing too good, and I remember that. But I mean, I understand. I mean, I wasn't doing that good, but they seen it and they said it, and good for them, I don't think they just realized how we were getting worked and what we had to do to keep going sometimes,
Sure. Now, when you did turn, when you did have that big babyface turn in Crockett's company, was that something that you got excited about? Was that something you were nervous about, or was that something again that you just didn't really care? It was just part of the job.
Well, I was always kind of nervous in the Crockett organization. Because, I also told a story, I think, on the boards that in '86 when I came here, they asked me to come here out of Texas.
Okay.
And instead I went to Vern.
Right.
And they never forgot that. I was going up the stairs one time in Fayetteville, and Tully and Flair were standing at the top, and they go, oh, here's the guy that wouldn't come when we needed him to come. Now he's here. So that kind of always stuck in my mind, like they didn't forget.
Sure.
And they kind of, so I really kind of felt a little uncomfortable. I knew coming out of Texas and coming out of Florida with David Von Erich and doing business there, and coming out of Texas and doing business there, and coming out of the AWA and doing business there, I knew the character, Gorgeous Jimmy Garvin and Precious, could do business if given a chance.
Sure.
And, the Wahoo thing was going, and then they turned me babyface, and I thought, okay, I can still make this work. I still, can control my gimmick to the point that, I'm creative enough to make this work. I just need a little help, it takes two to tango. So I kind of always knew in the back of my mind that the rope was going to run out pretty soon.
Sure.
It wasn't, turning me babyface and then, teaming me up with Bill Dundee. I mean, what in the world was that all about, or, team me up with Ronnie. That didn't make any sense either. I mean, because I was a single, basically, under the Gorgeous Jimmy Garvin and Precious character. So.
Sure. Absolutely. Talking a little bit about Vern, what are your memories of that run? And I remember it, and I thought it was tremendous that you had with Rick Martel over the AWA World Title.
Yeah, fantastic gentleman. Rick Martel, again, was a great piece of talent, a great individual in person, and just a really nice guy and a good businessman, and could wrestle. And his work and my work kind of was like Chris Adams and I when we worked. We just knew each other's style. We could adapt to the changes if we needed to on an instant, and we both had the same psychology as far as how the match should start and how the match should continue through the middle and how the match should end. We were really mentally connected. And that's what's important in having those kind of old school classic matches, is the guys have to be able to read each other pretty good. And Rick Martel and I did a heck of a job. And Vern had a great territory there. Mm-hmm. I mean, he's an old school guy, and he sold wrestling.
Sure. And I think it says a lot about you anyway, in that Vern had got you at the time, and you were a top guy. You were in the top program with Martel, and that was at the time when Vern was looking to expand in the Northeast, and he was running the Meadowlands and places like that. So I think it says a lot about you as well and how he saw you.
Well, and I appreciate that, and I'm glad he recognized it. Because I had worked, almost a quarter of a century on my skills, and it wasn't like, I wasn't going to my first dance. I use that phrase kind of often, the fact that, I could go into Vern's territory and with a little help from the company, and let me have a little creative flow going, and we'll not only give the people their money's worth, but we'll have a good time, and everybody will make money.
Sure, absolutely. Now, what when you had come into Vern's territory, and well, not when you came in, but when you wound up getting that tag team title run with Steve Regal, what was the story with the Phantom title change with you and the Road Warriors?
I'm not sure if Vern was trying to give the Road Warriors a secret message,
right,
or not. Because I wasn't in on that and didn't really know. But I mean, the Road Warriors were the Road Warriors. I mean, those guys, again, I respect them tremendously. Why would they drop it to Steve and I? I mean, we didn't even know it was going to happen too much until a night that it happened. And the only thing that I can figure out was there must have been something going on, some power struggle thing going on. And this is just my thoughts. I mean, maybe Animal would know. I'm sure he would, because he would, have privy to the information. But it was pretty bizarre to have Steve and I, of all people. Of course, thank goodness, like I said, too, sometimes on the boards, the Warriors liked us a lot.
Yeah.
And we got along well with them, so they didn't care.
Yeah, and you seem to have very good chemistry with them. You've worked them, I would imagine, hundreds of times.
Yeah, worked with them a lot, and was very good friends with both of them.
Right. We were talking briefly before. You were talking about having good chemistry with Martel and just knowing where you were. Do you remember any guy or guys that you had wrestled that you just, after the match was over, and it's not saying anything negative on them, that you just said to yourself, wow, we are just on two different pages and we just can't get anything going here?
I'm sure along my way there was guys like that. I really can't bring to my mind right now. I'd have to really stop and think about the guys that I worked with. Sometimes you would just have bad chemistry. The guy would maybe just not be, maybe he was thinking too much of one-sided, or, that's a question that we'd have to sit over for a little bit and let me think of the guys. There was a guy named a black guy, bald-headed Sonny. You remember that?
Sonny Fargo?
No, he was down in Florida.
Huh.
I can't remember his name right now, but he was always a little bit hard to work with. But, he wanted to get over, and he was going to do whatever he had and do whatever he could do to get over. And sometimes that's not always the best thing to do. It takes two guys working together.
Sure.
To make everything happen.
Sure, absolutely.
And I'll probably remember that guy's name too when we hang up.
I'll look for the answer on the boards.
Yeah.
What are your memories of Texas? I've been lucky enough. I've had Kevin Von Erich on the show quite a few times, and one of the few guys that I actually stay in touch with in between his appearances. And I mean, just what a super guy, at least from my experiences with him.
Great guy, just a great guy, good friend of ours, good family friend, as were all the Von Erich boys. Good friends with Patty and I, and Texas was just a magical place. And I've said this before too, either on the boards or from my email club. But in '83 when we went there, all the stars were lined up in the right place. I mean, the boys were on top of their game. The Freebirds were there, feeling no pain and on top of their game. The angle with myself and Chris Adams was hot. Iceman King Parsons, Skandor Akbar and his gang. Everything was just so perfect that we couldn't do no wrong. I mean, we just totally it was magical in Texas. Everybody was paired up with the right person. All the angles that were being constructed were with the right people, and it was perfect.
Wow. Now, how did you wind up with Sunshine? Where did she come from?
Sunshine's my cousin.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, she's my cousin. She's from Tampa, and she's doing fine now. Originally, and to make a long story kind of short, when I was just Jimmy Garvin, an old-timer down in Opelika, Florida, a friend of Eddie Graham's, Lester Welsh, saw me working, and I came back to the dressing room, and he says, Jim, I've known you for forever. He says, and you got good background, you got a good basic style. He says, but you need to have a gimmick. So that really burnt, on my mind that he's probably right.
Mm-hmm.
So then the gorgeous Jimmy Garvin character came up, and then Eddie Graham had a friend that he hooked me up with to be the valet, and I just created the character from there. But of course, being, the fact that this girl was, in the limo picking me up at home and going away for days, that was kind of wearing on the family a little bit, to say the least. And Patty's such a wonderful person and a wonderful wife, and I realized the pressure there. So I said, well, look, I'll get rid of her and I'll try to figure something out, but I got to keep the gimmick going because I knew it was just a matter of time before it totally caught on fire, as it did. And so I said, okay, I've got an idea. I'll get my cousin Valerie, and so I called her up, and of course she had never even been to a wrestling match. I said, come on, I'll teach you on the way to Texas. This is what we're going to do. And she was the perfect natural. I mean, she just did such a great job.
Yeah.
So that's how Sunshine was brought to Texas.
Yeah, and your wife was just such a natural, especially when you were a heel. Just that voice, and you guys had charisma together. I mean, she was just such a natural in that role.
And that's amazing too, because she didn't want anything to do with that.
Wow.
I mean, I had to beg her and beg her and beg her. And in fact, I still owe her for doing that. Because when Sunshine, try to bust through this pretty quick on this whole deal, when Sunshine was in Texas with me for almost a year, I mean, we were partying really, really, really hard. Too hard for our own good, actually, and sometimes it got to the point where her and Buddy Roberts were really having a good time as far as a couple of days at a time, and I said, this can't go on because her dependability was starting to wear.
Yeah.
And no disrespect to her, that was just normal to take a young girl like her out of a small town, and Tampa being a small town compared to the United States where we traveled, but she needed a break.
Yeah.
And then I said, well, okay, Patty, you got to do it. You got to do it. There's nobody else to do it. And Patty said, no, I ain't doing it because it's so totally against her normal nature. And then finally she said, okay, I'll do it for you. And she did it for 5 years. She traveled with me around the world. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We've been together 35 years.
Wow. God bless you. That is tremendous.
I'm so grateful. I'm so blessed. God has really watched over me, and I appreciate it.
Well, God bless you. That's tremendous, and what an example. And I mean that you could write a book right there.
Yeah, I mean 35 years. We met when we were kids. She had just turned 14. I was like 16 or something like that. And I'm in love with her. Tomorrow I'm going to be more in love with her than I am today. And we have 2 beautiful daughters. One's going to be 27 in August. She lives in Manhattan. She's a photographer, and her name's Brianne, and the other one's Lacey, and she's going to go to University of Louisiana, New Orleans as a junior this fall.
We are talking to gorgeous Jimmy Garvin. You can go to his website, jimmygarvin.com. He has a DVD for sale, a behind-the-scenes look at the Great American Bash, the last touring Great American Bash, and just to get a look at the camaraderie and the differences back then as compared to now, because the locker rooms have been much more open nowadays than they were back then. So it's a very rare and interesting look back at the crew, the lifestyle, and all that good stuff. And that's available on jimmygarvin.com.